that happened in the service, unfortunately, that the officers often do not listen to the enlisted men. And in our ward, we had British clothing. We had this slip-over pajama top, and we had a pajama bottom with a drawstring in it. Well, that drawstring was a woven cord. It was a belt about so wide and woven, and it was right around, it was a waist high. Well, unfortunately, a busy time when we went off duty at 6 o'clock in the morning, it got our patients, awakened them at 5. We did all the vitals and everything on the patients, and looking around the room, one person missing. And we had a restroom, or head, if you will, at the end of the, and there's a door this corner and on the way. And the had petitions with the commodes. Mm-hmm. And these petitions went up about, 6, 7, 8 feet perhaps. And this fellow is difficult being busy doing your duties, and this fellow slipped in the bathroom. He took the cord out of his pajamas and climbed up on top of the petition, tied it around the water pipe, and strung himself up. And I said to the pharmacist mate in charge, I said, so-and-so is missing, dashed in there he was, strung up. We cut him down. I worked on him for 45 minutes and couldn't revive him. Of course, the psychiatrists and doctors arrived, and just no way to save him. But one of these things that that happens, that but the doctors, we had asked the doctors to take and give us new pajama bottoms and take those cords out because we didn't want to have them, and it was never done. Well, it's too late then. We lost a man, and it happened to be one of our own American sailors too.
Let's get into that part then. You were treating not just American sailors, but who else were you treating?
We had British. At that, before the invasion, we had, of course, our own Americans, and we had British, and mainly that was it prior to the invasion.
Mm-hmm. But then after the invasion?
After the invasion, we got, we had all branches of the service. We had the 101st there with fractured legs from the jump. We had, of course, casualties, prisoners. We had French collaborators. We had Hollanders. And these were wounded prisoners, and they were put under special guard, of course, in the areas we had prepared, and treating them there.
So you had a section that was for the Germans, for the...
Well, primarily for prisoners.
Okay.
And it was, most of those were well, surgical and medical. Mm-hmm. Of course, they went from surgery to medical maintenance.
Did any of them end up in your area?
No, we didn't have, as I recall, any of the any mental cases of the invasion other than British. I had one British fellow who was a reporter. And he was on the London newspaper, and he asked me what my name was. I said, it was Huston. He said, oh, you're a Scot name. I said, yeah, it's Huston, Scotland, Renfrewshire. And so he gave me a lot of information to write to us. He was on the open ward and was pretty well put together still, but he was recuperating.
So he probably witnessed things that he couldn't handle.
Yeah, I think
basically.
he came out of North Africa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Out of that campaign, because we had a number of them that came to us that were psychiatric from North Africa that came to our psychiatric wing.
Was there, how long did this, and I realize it's a long time to look back on, but how long a period of time was this onslaught of casualties coming through from the D-Day invasion? Did it last days? Did it last weeks?
Well, I would say it was approximately a good month.
Okay.
And then it started tapering off. And then the Americans, and we had British, and mainly that was it prior to the invasion.
Mm-hmm. But then after the invasion?
After the invasion, we got, we had all branches of the service. We had the 101st there with fractured legs from the jump. We had, of course, casualties, prisoners. We had French collaborators. We had Hollanders, and these were wounded prisoners, and they were put under special guard, of course, in the areas we had prepared and treating them there.
So you had a section that was for the Germans, for the...
Well, primarily for prisoners.
Okay.
And it was, most of those were well, surgical and medical. Of course, they went from surgery to medical maintenance.
Did any of them end up in your area?
No, we didn't have, as I recall, any mental cases of the invasion other than British. I had one British fellow who was a reporter, and he was on the London newspaper, and he asked me what my name was. I said, it was Huston. He said, oh, you're a Scot name. I said, yeah, it's Huston, Scotland, Renfrewshire. And so he gave me a lot of information to write to us. He was on the open ward and was pretty well put together still, but he was recuperating.
So he probably witnessed things that he couldn't handle.
Yeah, I think he came out of North Africa.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Out of that campaign, because we had a number of them that came to us that were psychiatric from North Africa that came to our psychiatric wing.
Was there, how long did this, and I realize it's a long time to look back on, but how long a period of time was this onslaught of casualties coming through from the D-Day invasion? Did it last days? Did it last weeks?
Well, I would say it was approximately a good month.
Okay.
And then it started tapering off. And then the Army started establishing field hospitals in France, Belgium, and then they were handling their casualties there, and then they were, ones that were ready to be discharged well enough to transport, send them back to the States. And some of them were, of course, recuperated enough to be reassigned back to their units, and we had some who went back to their units from our place too. And the 29th Division, of course, was the prime casualties we took from Omaha. And I had a classmate from high school, unbeknownst to me, he was one of the casualties at Omaha. And he and I still get together for our reunions back there. And he went in as on the third wave at Omaha as the 81st Beach Battalion, or 81st, 81st Mortar Battalion, and was dropped in high water and had to ditch his gear and trying to make it to shore, and got behind a tank and thought he was going to be safe there. The first 88 hit in front of the tank, and the second 88 hit in the back of the tank, and a piece of shrapnel got him. And he made it into the beach and was was cared for by the doctors and the corpsman there, and but before he could, about the second or about the third day, I think he was finally transported out of there to get back, and ended up at our hospital, unbeknownst to me at that given time. We found that out about 1996. 42 years later, we find out, or 52, whatever it is.
You had mentioned the 101st, the paratroopers. You said the casualties were mainly their legs were broken or splintered or something because of the fall, right? The landing?
Yeah, on landing. It's usually that's what happened. I met one fellow locally here several years ago that he was in the 101st, but it was before he signed it, but he didn't even make it out of training because many of them in their practice jumps down at Fort Benning, Georgia, and just were injured and came out. That was it. Yeah, and much of the injuries that happened were on the jumps that we received.
Now, were you getting any reports on the success of D-Day? I mean, you're seeing casualties, and if you're seeing that many casualties, it may not look like we're winning, but did you have any idea of whether we were actually succeeding in what we were doing?
No, I can't recall that I did, other than later on that after they had made the breakthrough, that we found out about that.
Okay.
But there wasn't, we're so darn busy with our duties and working 12 hours a day, and got into that routine, and you just didn't.
Yeah, no, I understand. So when it started to wind down, was there any indication that you were going to be transferred from there, or was your basic belief that you're just going to stay there until the end of the war?
Well, we didn't. I didn't know at the time, but all of a sudden we got orders that we're going to ship the medical personnel back to the States, and we. This was in October of '44, and the doctors, nurses, and the corpsmen came back in two groups. I came back with the first group, and we went to Liverpool, England, and picked up the USS Wakefield, which is a Coast Guard man, APA, and came back to the States. And lo and behold, we had German prisoners on board. And lo and behold, we had psychiatric cases. And guess what I was doing? I had German prisoners, psychiatric cases. All the way back to the States for about 8 days. And that was quite an experience. We had one fellow that got away, if you will, and we were topside going into the chow line, and he had some way or another climbed up and got up on the rigging on one of the on the boat deck, and climbing out on one of the poles, if you will, and they trying to, his German buddies, are talking him down. Well, the Marine guards on board, and they're going to shoot him down. Well, finally they held off, and they finally talked him down. He did come down, but he got locked up too. And he was just another one. He wasn't one of the ones I had, but he was one of the group.
I guess it's difficult to look at it from the perspective of now, but you're in a room with the enemy. What was your reaction to meeting the Germans, the German prisoners? I mean, was there any animosity, or was there any, what did you feel like when they brought them?
No, they were very, very submissive. There was, they gave them a command. Many of them could understand. Some of them spoke English. Some understood enough English to follow orders. and there was very little communication as far as that's concerned. And pretty much in a room, and usually you had enough corpsmen on a one-to-one basis usually, but if they all had it put together, I was thinking back in a situation in England where you had perhaps 24 patients in this one room, and you only had 4 or 6 corpsmen on duty. Well, they could swarm you and take over, but being the mental conditions which they were, they didn't put together that organization, fortunately.
Where were these Germans from? Were they a result of the Normandy?
As far as I know, they were ones that were captured in the early part of the campaign in Normandy, in France.
So you arrived back in the States. Did you get any leave?
Yeah, we had came back into Boston and went into receiving station at the Fargo building, and we got 21-day leave, and went home back to City and had 21 days, and came back, reported back to Fargo building, and waiting for assignment. And so finally, after we must have been there about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, at least 2 weeks, and we were drafted to 150 of us, went by troop train to Shoemaker, California, and most all of us were corpsmen. We came over, the group that came from England pretty much stayed together. 3 of us that stayed together. We went to Shoemaker, California together, and then went to San Diego to catch our ship, and the ship wasn't there, it was on shakedown. Finally went up to San Pedro and caught our ship there in December of 1944. So
you're on a train chasing a boat, basically.
Right, yeah, we're running around the countryside, so to speak.
Well,
the three of us stayed together. That we were not in one fellow. I was in psychiatric. One fellow was in burn in the burn ward, and another fellow was he did general duty, I guess. When he wasn't in the brig, he was in general duty. He was a corpsman too.
So once you got on the ship, did you know where you were going?
Not really. The fact that after we got underway, usually word got out to the enlisted men anyway that we're headed to Seattle, and we were the ship had just come in off of shakedown, and we went to I left, I think, this 1st of January of 45 and headed for Seattle, where we got picked up troops and that and supplies and everything, and we were supposed to pick up a convoy leaving out of Seattle to head for Pearl Harbor. And at the time, ready to leave, we found 4 feet of seawater and after steering. Well, after steering room is in the lower stern of the ship, in the lower deck room that is used for manual steering of the ship in case the remote steering is knocked out from the bridge to steer the ship. And you steer it manually from that post. And the question was, how did 4 feet of seawater get into after steering? And so right away we had naval investigation. So the old man, the captain that is, Captain Ankrick, who was, Captain Ankrick still spoke with a German accent. And he was born in Berlin, Germany in 1900. I know because I had his medical records and reviewed them later on. And he was spoke the German accent, and so the fellow was on duty on that post when we got underway, or ready to get underway, was a fellow, a Swede from up in Minnesota by the name of Johnson. And so the old man, Captain Ankring, called him up to his cabin. He was like his responsible, and he's, he says, come and salute him. Third class motor machinist Major Johnson reporting, sir. He says, what is your weight? He says, 140 pounds, sir. He says, no, your weight. You know, he's third class, but he kept telling, he told me that story after he but we were tied up with a naval investigation, if you will. And I don't know, some valve had been left open, something happened, it allowed the seawater to come in. We missed our convoy. It left for Pearl Harbor, and so we left a few days later on our own. But at the time we were in port, we see the lights of Seattle, and we couldn't get off the ship and all this bit, you know, and so we left and ran it alone to Pearl Harbor. And matter of fact, we never did catch up with it. We went from Pearl Harbor, took on fuel and more supplies, and then we headed to on our way to Guadalcanal and down to the Philippines.
Now, Guadalcanal had already been taken.
Correct, and that had already
Okay.
secured, yeah.
So when you arrived at Guadalcanal, did you actually disembark? Did you go on to the island?
No, we didn't. We didn't go on there. We were at I just lost the name of the island. We did in the group.
No, that's all right. Don't worry about
We
it.
were we pulled in that bay, and
Oh, that's the one that was a staging area for all the.
no,
No?
this was before. Then from there we went to from there to Manila, and that was in February. Across the line, across the equator.
Mm-hmm.
Had our ceremony.
Yeah, the King Neptune ceremony. How did that go?
Quite well, thank you.
Were you initiated?
Oh yeah, I was initiated.
So you were a
and,
polywog, and
I was
you
a
got
polywog,
initiated.
and the shellbacks, and we had a royal court.
Oh my God!
It was a lot of fun, if you will, but we had a chief warrant officer, another gentleman by the name of Davis had been in about 20 years, and he's still a polywog. So they got the idea that they're going to take, and at the morning of the ceremony, arrange that the shellbacks were having mess together, and they're going to close off the compartment and lock them in the mess hall so they couldn't get out to have the ceremony. Well, anyway, this whole idea was blamed on the warrant officer Davis, and he was. So they took him and came and put a cross in his head like this, you know, and shaved it right down to the scalp, and put a cross right in his scalp. And so that whole mutiny fell to the wayside, and they prepared the court. And we had one fellow, our pharmacist mate, who was a pharmacist by profession, and a pharmacist mate on board, did our pharmacy on board ship, and a fellow named was Schaefer. And so he said, well, I'm going to take this. So he took battle dressings and tied them on the seat of his, underneath his dungarees. And when we did this, we had a T-shirt on and our dungarees and shoes, that's all, because we knew we were going to get a treatment. And he put this battle dressing underneath his dungarees, tied around his buttocks, if you will. And so when he went through the line, why they discovered this, and off comes his trousers, the battle dress, and everything else. But the ceremony was, of course, on top side and on the aft of the ship, and he went before the King Neptune, and big bosun's mate was fat belly and everything, and they had this here concoction of hot sauce and mustard and everything rubbed into his belly, and you had to kiss his navel, and you come up and you push your head into it, you know. Then they took you over in the royal barber, and you're seated in a chair up on a platform, and you sit down there, and the fellow hits you with a razor a couple times, or a shaver, the hair, and this here chair was right on the edge of a tank, which is probably about 12 feet in square and about 4 feet deep, full of water. And you're in the chair, and all of a sudden they take that thing and flip you, and you go right over into the tank head first. And there's 3 or 4 guys in there. They grabbed you and immerse you, and you come up and it says shell back, and before you could say shell back, you're down again. About the 3rd time you could get it out, then you got out of there. And then they had, from that, a trough, and the trough is probably about 16 feet long, and so wide, with a rail over the top, and this trough was filled with garbage, and that was right in the stern of the ship. Well, you had to crawl through that on your hands and knees, and as you went through it, the fellows along the side hitting you with a paddle, and that's when they caught Schaefer. And but fortunately, we did not have. We had one fellow had a dislocated finger. I think that was about it. Mm-hmm. And of course, I worked in sick bay at that time and taking care of that. But we were very fortunate we didn't have anything serious, because later on in the war, it could have been even at Korea, but they discontinued because of the fact that one fellow was killed in this ceremony. But anyway, it was quite an experience. But we crossed the equator, I think in February 2nd or 3rd, and almost if you cross the intersection, international date line, and the equator at that bisection, you become a golden shellback. We hit it at 3 degrees north on the international date line, and that was on our way to Guadalcanal.
Okay, so you arrive at Guadalcanal. Were you able from the ship to see the devastation, or was it just? Yeah,
some of it. Of course, this was that was August of '42. This was almost a year and a half later, right. And it's pretty well cleaned up as far as that's concerned.
So it was a base now for the Americans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So from Guadalcanal, you went then to what, Manila, the Philippines?
Manila.
And that was already taken.
Yeah, that had just been. Manila had been freed, and we went ashore there, and they're still burning Japanese arms, and we could not. Atlantic Avenue, Pacific Avenue, and they were just. We weren't allowed to eat anything ashore or drink anything, especially had to carry own food and canteen water, and some of the they were diluting whiskey, if you will, with wood alcohol, and some of the fellows drank that. Get totally blind from that, and there was a number of cases of that. And they're also taking repackaging photographic film. Where they got it, I don't know, repackaged it. It's in Kodak package spools, and selling that. Some of it was good and some of it wasn't good. But the devastation was quite heavy in and around Manila.
Destroyed buildings.
Yeah.
It looked like a war zone. There,
really, yeah. Some of it was untouched, but much of it in the outskirts was pretty heavily hit.
What was your duty there? Was that just you're passing through there, or was you actually?
We went on Liberty there. We actually went ashore, on Liberty, and some of the fellows picked up some. Not supposed to have firearms aboard the ship. I mean, as far as like privately owned things, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we couldn't get any of the 25 rifles or anything of this nature of the Japanese.
So once you finished the Liberty in Manila, where'd you go from there?
We went on training, amphibious training through some of the islands. We went to Anahuac and Kwajalein, and I don't know, a number of the islands, and did practice landings. And
In anticipation of what?
this is getting prepared actually for Okinawa. And we didn't know at the time because Iwo was already being attacked at, this was middle of February, and the campaign there started about the 19th of February.
Exactly.
And we didn't know it, but Okinawa was the target. And we were on amphibious training and launching our P-boats, LCVPs, and we had 20 of those aboard the APA USS Navarro. And we would take and practice launching those, practice going in the beach and this sort of thing.
Now, Jay, your experience up to this point has been treating the casualties of a war, but in a relatively safe environment. Now you're actually training to go onto a beachhead.
Right.
I mean, what were your thoughts?
Well, it's I think it's because you take the fellows that many of whom were 18, 19, 20-year-olds that don't realize the danger, but the potential there of danger, and that is why a number of them Medal of Honor winners.
Yeah.
That age.
Yep.
And that I think is, you just don't realize. We know that you know it's there, but you don't give it too much second thought.
Okay. So the training is over with. Where did you put that training into effect? What happened next?
Well, we went to after the number of islands in training, we picked up troops in the Philippines and went on to see, we had up to Ulithi was our staging point.
Mm-hmm.
And lost another patient in the sick bay, and always happens when I'm on duty, but anyway, we're in Ulithi, on our way to Ulithi, and I recall our third-class radioman, a fellow by the name of Jacobson from Seattle, and he was diagnosed with cerebral spinal meningitis. And a lab technician on board, the fellow by the name of Glenn Sandel from Chicago, who's diagnosed it from his lab tests and everything, and he was really upset about it. That well, I guess there wasn't too much to do to treat him at that given time, and what was medication, what was available. But I know he lasted him at 6 a.m. about 3 days out of Ulithi, and we didn't. We had to get instructions from PACCON in Pearl Harbor what to do. We didn't have any embalming fluid. I don't know what happened to embalming fluid, but we didn't have any. Maybe somebody drank it. I don't know. It went down in the hole of the ship.
Oh,
and we stored our alcohol down there too. We had 95% grain alcohol, which is, and some of those would come up missing at times too. But anyway, so we had to receive orders of whether have a sea burial or whether to bury him at the Naval Cemetery in Ulithi. And so it ended up we prepared him for burial. And then when we got to Ulithi, we had a burial party, and we went ashore, and I was in that party to bury Mr. Jacobson. The sad part of it was the fellow was engaged to be married when he got back to the States, and just one of those things that happen. It's sad.
So after you left Ulithi, where did you go? Were you part of the?
We were headed for Okinawa.
Yep.
And of course that occurred April 1, 1945, Easter Sunday, April Fool's Day. And they expected an attack on the opposite side of the island, and we went in what is now called Buckner Bay on the west side of the island. And they pulled in there at morning of April 1. We launched our P-boats and the beach party of the corpsman.
Now, let's set the pace. So let's set the scene here, though. We've got ships in the bay, American ships, because I know the Franklin was there and the Hale was there.
Well, the Franklin had been hit.
Right. Oh, already. Okay.
Already been hit.
Okay. Okay.
That's another. She was. She pulled in to Ulithi. She was hit, I think, the 21st of March, and pulled into Ulithi a day or two later. She's only 50 miles off the coast of Japan when she took the bombs, and pulled into Ulithi, and I saw the ship, and one of my fellows had been a corpsman with me and did duty in England together was correspondent. He was aboard the Franklin, and so a group of us got a LCVP and went over to it, and we couldn't get aboard because of the investigation, etc.
Sure.
But she was under her own power, and I didn't know at that given time that he was still survived or not. He did, and I received a letter from him after the ship had made its own way all the way back to Brooklyn, New York.
Wow.
Some months later.
There's a gentleman here, lives in Lowell, that was on.
Yeah, Dave Clark knows my shipmate, or knew of him. He has a ship log of Franklin, and we've been in contact with one another. And this fellow is living in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and we visited. And I found him after years, and so he's now just talked with his wife a couple weeks ago, and they're moving back to Philadelphia, where he's originally from.
So you're now at Okinawa. So the main battle is already over with, the Kamikazes and all that, or are you?
No, we're at the beginning. This is the start. This is the initial landing.
Okay.
And we landed the 2nd Marine Division at 0730 about. And the beach party consists of a beach master. I say beach party, that's the medical group from our ship. And
is there firing going on? Is there a battle going on?
the shelling had taken place, shelling, and the idea was to cut the island in half right there. And we were very fortunate. We did not have any resistance. The airport 2 miles from the beach, we hit Blue Beach with the LCVP at approximately 7:30, and went through all the way to the airport. It's been evacuated, and it didn't have any resistance. So we set up station on the shore and waiting for casualties to come in so we could send them to the Comfort of Hospital ship or back to our own ship, which had been designated as a burn ship, burn for burn patients. Mm-hmm. And it was that was about the only activity we had, and the Marines moved on through, and the first encounter they had was about the time they got to the airport and beyond that. and they cut the island in at the waist there in about 2 or 3 days they were crossed.
Now, were you receiving casualties?
We got a few casualties, and then we just took them by LCVP back to the comfort of the hospital ship there.
So there wasn't as much resistance
No,
at that time?
no, not at that given time. It was
Right.
when they started moving north and south with the Army and the Marines
Right.
that they got the prolonged engagement, because that lasted, let's see, this was April. They didn't get that secured until, sometime in July? I don't remember the dates on it, but I know it was probably one of the longest campaigns and the costliest of the war, of the Pacific War, was at Okinawa.
Now, were you there the whole time?
We were there for about 9 days.
Oh, okay.
And then we were on. Then we pulled out. We were actually on shore about a day and about I think it's 56 hours. It was on shore.
And where'd you go from there?
And we came back to the ship, and then we started to take kamikazes, and we got out of there and went to Guam. And on
Kamikazes?
They were coming in.
But your ship didn't get hit?
No, that was later on in our second trip in there, which was a month or so later. But what we did, we went to Guam, and I got refueled and headed to Pearl Harbor. In Pearl Harbor, we went on maneuvers. Maneuvers? Life maneuvers?
Yeah.
Shelling?
Yeah.
And at Maui, you wouldn't believe it today, but with the beautiful island of Maui now, but we went in as under fire and went on maneuvers. Unbeknownst to us at the time, we were getting prepared for the invasion of Japan. This was May of 1945.
So you went back out, and this is when you were engaged in a battle with the Kamikazes?
We went back from Pearl Harbor to the States and pick up more troops. Took them to Okinawa, back to the same area. And this is when we got hit. Took one kamikaze, and my battle station was on a 20 millimeter gun tub on the starboard side. And it came down. We were bringing our P-boats back on board, and we circled out there, and plane came down. It was coming in, and we were firing. The KA-13 was over here, and we're firing like this, and the old man, cease fire, because otherwise we're going to be firing each other.
Sure.
And I could see the pilot. I don't know whether he was dead or not at the time, but he crashed into the ocean right in between us. We were probably 500 yards apart from the other ship, and he came down and he sank immediately.
Was he alone, or was there other planes in the air?
They were alone.
Okay.
The Kamikazes.
Was there any other? So this guy just came out of nowhere, so to speak?
He got through the fence, which was we had on the perimeter protecting us. We had destroyers and destroyer escorts out there.
I see.
And this is where we really took a beating. I mean, they got a lot of the ships. I don't know how many, 22 ships were sank or something.
Yeah.
From those specially trained pilots. And when he brought this one down, we had, I was on the 22 millimeter gun tub, and our first class boatswain mate, a fellow by the name of Fred Layton, was standing on the deck down here, and a piece of shrapnel came through his Midwest right into his side. And the only casualty we had. Now this man had survived the attack in Pearl Harbor, had gotten out of there on an old four-stacker destroyer during the attack. All that time, all those years, now he's in the last battle of the war and he gets hit. And I took care of him during this course of and it was not a simple thing to do. He's fortunate he had a Mae West on his stomach. It only went superficially in between his ribs, but anyway, it took a long time to heal, get that healed.
Yeah. So after the Battle of Okinawa, were you effectively out of the war?
Oh, we went back to the States again and brought another load of troops back. And then we went to the Philippines, picked up the Maricel Division, I think. The Maricel is, I think, a collection of leftovers from different divisions that came together, and we took them up to the Northern Ireland of Japan to occupy Northern Ireland, Japan.
So the bomb had already dropped.
So that, yes, that's, now we're a little bit ahead of ourselves, because we did go to the Philippines. We did go to the Philippines, and we picked up on the 77th to the Yokohama, and we were in there September 1 to one of the first of the occupation troops. We landed at Yokohama.
Let's go back briefly, because we have to wind this down, unfortunately. Yeah. What was your reaction to the bomb? How'd you find out about it?
It came over the radio, and that was, I mean, announced, you know, this is the end, you know, and then they dropped the second bomb, and then it was finally finalized, and then we were at, let's see, where were we? I think we were in Ulithi at the time, on the 15th, when the
surrender.
And then that's when we went to the Philippines, picked up and went in for the occupation of Yokohama.
So were you part of the occupation then?
Not personally, just all we did is drop the troops.
Okay.
Disembarked the troops, and then we headed on out to Seisabu, and they went to, I think, Tientsin, China, and down through there and back to the Philippines again, and then we went up to, from the Philippines, pick up more troops, and we occupied the Northern Ireland, Japan. That was October, and they didn't realize, some of them didn't realize the war was over.
Oh, wow.
There's a few dead bodies in the bay and this sort of thing, but we didn't have any organized resistance as far as that's concerned, but we took occupation troops in there. And then we went on down to, from there, we headed down, I think, to the Philippines. We picked up a load of fellows coming back to the States to be discharged.
And you finally made it home.
Yeah, that was Christmas of '45.
Wow.
And then we, lo and behold, ended up with bringing these fellows home. We had a number of psychiatric patients. We put up in the forecastle of the ship in a compartment, and who was doing duty up there had another psychiatrics that I took care of on the way back to the States. They came back and back to San Francisco and disembarked those troops and the psychiatric patients. And
I've got 3 more questions for you.
okay.
What was the reaction when you got back home to your parents?
Well, they were so glad to see me, and a lot of tears shed and this sort of thing.
You're in your uniform, right?
Well, yeah, I wore my uniform back. You know, it's I got back on the 20th of March of 1946.
It had to be a proud moment, Jay.
Yeah, it was. And my buddy, another buddy who had enlisted during his senior year of high school, he and I were very close, and he was a sonar man and never got out of the States. We're down in Key West and never got out of, I think, the territorial waters of the United States. And a year later, he and I I was home from college on Easter vacation. We're over in Erie, Pennsylvania, walking down. Hey, the recruitment office there. So we go and enlist. in the Naval Reserve.
Oh my gosh.
So along comes Korea, and I got my orders on my birthday in August of 1950. Just 2 months from 3 months from graduating from college, and family and immediate standby, 24-hour standby to be called up to go to Korea.
We'll get into that another time.
Okay.
All right, I got two more questions.
Yeah, okay.
How do you feel, you went in a boy, you went in at 17 years old.
Right.
How did your military experience affect the person that you are today?
I think it was one that directed me into where I wanted to go into future education. I had one corpsman, which I started on board ship in August 1945 doing the X-ray work, and this one corpsman, a fellow by the name of Dwight Morgan from Indiana, and he'd been trained in specialized in X-ray, and I did all the X-ray work for about the last year I was on board ship. And as a result of that, why, when I got out and determined what I wanted to do, I said, well, am I going to go into engineering or go into X-ray technology? And I elected to go into medical X-ray technology, which I did. So that was my direction.
Okay. This is a tougher question. I know that at the time, because I've spoken to so many veterans of World War II, you were called up for duty, you did your duty, you were part of a whole big effort. You weren't the only guy fighting the war, so to speak. But Jay, where do you feel you fit into the whole picture? I know you did your part and all that, but is there something in particular you felt that you did that's part of this whole effort that we call World War II?
Well, it's difficult to say that I was part of an overall team which did the mercenary things of being a hospital corpsman, and one which we took care of casualties, we took care of patients, we took care of, depending on where you were, and if you were with the Fleet Marines and in the action, that type of action, we still did a mercenary job in taking care of our mankind. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, is a real contribution to the war effort and to the victory, because the humanitarian outlook was the Germans had more, I think, respect, if you will, the rules of war, the Geneva Conference, the Red Cross, and et cetera, than the Japanese did. And this is one in which was good, if there's any good part of it, to serve there rather than serving in one of the islands in the Pacific, where a corpsman was targeted, whether he was carrying his Red Cross, forget about the Red Cross in your arm, the Red Cross in your helmet, then you target your M3 bag, your medical bag, and these fellows were targets. Mm-hmm. And I think that the fellows sacrificed their lives. The doctors, especially those on Iwo Jima, which had lots of many corpsmen, and I think that these fellows are real heroes, and I'm just one of the fortunate ones that here today,
And Jay, I'm very glad you are, sir. It's a real pleasure. Thank you so much.